Good afternoon. My name is Carissa Landymore. I am the DoDNet Program Manager. Very excited to be here with you all today. We have a great panel for you. We're going to be talking about DoDNet, which is an enterprise service at the Defense Information Systems Agency. We are making a lot of technological advancements with that capability. So the wonderful gentlemen sitting next to me here are going to talk to you about how we're doing, how we're evolving. So really excited. A little bit of housekeeping. I will kick off with giving just a high-level overview. I'm going to turn it over to these guys to introduce themselves. I'm going to ask them some questions, and then at the end we'll leave about 15 or so minutes for any Q&A from the audience. So with that, Mr. Brett, I will turn it over to you.
Jonathan Brett. I am the Chief Engineer for Leidos. I've been with the program for about a year now. Hand it to Chad.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Chad Beekle. I'm the Leidos overall lead for the DES program, supporting DoDNet, and I've been with the program for about a year and a half now, since we stood it up in June of 2022. Mike?
Hey, good afternoon. Mike Butler. I'm the DoDNet Chief Engineer on the Gov side. I've been with the program for about 3 years now, and looking forward to talking with you all this afternoon.
And I'm being told just speak up a little bit when we go through this. Okay, so go ahead and kicking things off here. You can jump to the next slide for me. Thank you, Larry. So DoDNet, before I jump into Generation 2 and Release 1, I want to take a couple steps back just to set the stage here. DoDNet is a 10-year program. It was brought to light to help strengthen our networks, bring together all the defense agencies and consolidate them into one network. So the team has been working diligently to provide that. They're going to talk to you a little bit about who we're currently supporting today and how many users we have on the service. But our focus is on supporting the defense agencies, but we're not going to stop there. So they'll talk to you a little bit about where we plan to go and how we plan to evolve that to support the larger community across the department. A little bit about Gen 2. The architecture that we have established with the current infrastructure, the DoDNet Gen 1 capability, we're looking to add resiliency to that, really help take that foundation and build upon it, adding scalability, redundancy, interoperability, and really what that's intended to do is to help posture us to get this service to the mission partners faster, being able to get their network migrated over more seamlessly and more efficiently. What that will do is allow us to bring greater agility, better security, an improved user experience, and then also while modernizing our infrastructure. And really what we're saying there is we're looking to take it and be able to move things to the cloud. So you'll see us take a more hybrid approach, keeping some things on-prem, but trying to start to transition into the cloud to give us that flexibility to bring more automation, right? Be able to improve our monitoring as well. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start right in with you guys if you're ready.
Sure.
Yep.
All right, so Mike, I'm going to turn it over to you first. For those who may not be familiar, can you elaborate a little bit more on the DoDNet program and what it is?
Absolutely. So out of the IT reform initiative that the department started, I guess about 5 years or so now, DoDNet was born from that. Right? The idea is to take common use IT services, the LAN services, the back office services, and make those an enterprise offering that the department can leverage across unclassified and classified networks. So the idea is to make sure that we have an enterprise service that can help manage the user experience, endpoint management, the LAN services, those type of capabilities, and make sure that they are available at a scalable, resilient, and modified way that the users can go ahead and focus on their mission activities, right? So whether it's a DAFA, whether it's a future service capability or a command, we want to make sure that those unclassified and classified services are readily available for multiple classifications for NIPR and SIPR primarily, but we will expand beyond that. a lot of our focus is to make sure that we're on a kind of a glide path to get to the 400 or so thousand users that are in the defense field activities and, the DAFAs, the defense agencies and field activities, as well as all those DAFA organizations that are focused on their mission applications, right? Take their focus off of the common use day-to-day and make sure that they are scaling their infrastructure to support mission capabilities across the enclaves.
So if I could add, Carissa.
Yeah, please.
So one of the things that Mike talked about that I think is really important is thinking about supporting the DAFAs and what we're trying to accomplish with the 370 to 400,000 users or so. But one of the other things that Carissa mentioned during the intro was about sort of the 10-year program and the service offerings. And what we're already seeing, right, is that DoDNet and DES can be a vehicle that's also used by those organizations to obtain services outside of the DoDNet migration itself. So for example, one of the things that we're working on right now is supporting defense media activity, or DMA, providing legacy operations and support services to them right now as an additional offering that they get prior to migrating to DoDNet. So I think as we think about where we're going from an overall deployment schedule and migration schedule, it's also an opportunity that if organizations have a need, they can come to the DES vehicle and use it as a vehicle as opposed to just needing it for the migrations themselves.
And Chad, just for the audience, can you define what DES is?
Sure. So DES is itself, Defense Enclave Services, 10-year, $11.5 billion or so overall IDIQ ceiling. It's primarily, I think, threefold of what we're trying to do. So first and foremost on DES, we are providing the operations and maintenance of DoDNet itself. So we are managing sort of the end-to-end network for the DAFAs, DISA, and some of the other organizations that are already on there. The second thing that we're doing is we are focused on, and I think Jonathan will talk about it a little bit later, focused on the migration and planning efforts for those DAFAs. So think about that opportunity to create those journeys and migrate the DAFAs onto DoDNet to provide that single service provider. And then third, one of the big things that we're going to talk about here is we think about what we're calling Gen 2 R1 is how do we transform and continue to innovate and evolve the network that we have to make sure that we're staying abreast of the latest technologies, what's going on, and really providing that capability to the DAFAs. And then with that, so that's sort of the broad structure of what we're doing. And then part of that also, Carissa, to answer your question, is it's also a vehicle that can be used, right? So that's the DoDNet migration aspect. And then the additional service offerings that we're talking about are things like providing legacy work, should someone be interested in that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. All right. Mike, this one's back to you again.
Yes, ma'am.
What is the current state of the program? I think we've talked a little bit about
Right.
Gen 1, but can you elaborate a little bit more on where we are and where we're going?
Sure. So Gen 1 was I guess, a starting point for all this consolidation effort that we're trying to do for the land services, right? So it started out as DISANet, which was kind of the corporate back office for DISA and provided those common IT services. Beyond that, what we're looking to do with DoDNet and that transition there is to make sure that we're focusing on, that distributed network access, right? The increased scalability, all those capabilities going forward beyond just the scope of DISA and the initial DAFAs that are on the network. The additional the current DAFAs that are on the environment, Defense POW Mission Partner, Defense POW MIM County Agency, as well as the Defense Technical Information Center, DPA and DTIC. Sorry, I use their acronyms more often. So what we're focusing on them is providing those NIPR and SIPR services for those two agencies today. It's around 30,000 seats that we're supporting at the moment. And then we're starting into the planning and migration aspects for future DAFAs, right? So we have DCAA, DCMA, DLA, DMA, as well as DITRA, all on board to start looking at the aspects of their services, their common use technology, and how those transition over to DoDNet seamlessly and how they can take advantage of the capabilities that we put out there.
And then JB, can you tell us a little bit about the journey? What does it take to get an organization like a DLA onto DoDNet? What's that journey look like?
Absolutely, and we've already started that journey, as Mike said, with a number of agencies. It's really important that a migration of an agency's mission, right, of what they're doing day to day is not something that we take lightly, and it's something that we walk through, right? So we've got a discovery phase that we have started with a number of DAFAs, and then after that discovery phase has multiple components, right? We have a virtual discovery where we're exchanging information, collaborating, and then we'll have a physical discovery, and then we'll move on to a design phase where we're working with the agency to understand that agency's mission, to make sure that we can support it, but also design migration that is specific to that agency, right? And to tailor the services where need be, to add features where required, to make sure that while DoDNet is a universal offering, it's also something that supports each individual mission, because we understand there's different agencies that do different things and they have different requirements. And so that journey is something that we start, day one with discovery, and then we end it with the actual migration, right? Where we, have successfully transitioned to DoDNet, and then there's that operational support model, right, that we establish. So that path, both for the end users and for the infrastructure, is something that we work to kind of design together and agree upon and move forward on.
So two words come to mind as you talk through that, and I think it's transparency and partnership. Chad, you want to touch on a little bit?
Yeah, that's a great comment, and that's really where I was going. So, one of the big things that we're focused on is the end user experience and the customer experience, and making sure that as we work through this journey, we're doing this together in partnership with DISA, with Leidos, the DAFAs. Each of those organizations all have a vested interest in making sure that we are over-communicating and laying out what that journey looks like. As Jonathan talked about the various stages there, one of the big emphasis areas for us is making sure that we have teams that are signed from end to end. So really working through that journey together. It's the same people that are working with the DAFAs from the planning, through the design work, through the migration, and that handoff to operations, we think is really important from an overall transparency perspective in communicating that. And then from a partnership standpoint, as Jonathan mentioned, really focus on making sure we understand the unique needs of each of the DAFAs. We really spend the time to understand their missions, what they have going on, whether it's from a business standpoint, from an operational standpoint, from a networking standpoint, but really making sure we account for all of those items so it is a really positive experience for each of those DAFAs. And it really comes down to that partnership, making sure that we're partnering day in and day out with each of those organizations, with Carissa and her team as well, really to drive that forward.
Yeah, and one thing I want to mention too is we recognize how complex this is to migrate a user's endpoints and their existing network and modernize that. So we assign, both from our Leidos side of the house, our partners here, we assign a project manager from the government and Leidos to tag team and support that organization, right? They meet with them on a weekly basis, they go through the schedule, they build the schedule in partnership with them, making sure that end to end, everybody is on the same page because it's going to require a heavy lift. You're talking about not just one site typically, right? So a lot of these organizations have multiple buildings that have to be migrated. So making sure that we're working with them to come up with a plan that is executable in line with what they may already have going on at that organization or in that building is really important. So it's important to us because we also recognize this is probably an extra duty assigned for those organizations. So we want to be able to do the heavy lifting as much as we can. So we try to bring the right tools from a strategic comms perspective, building out, whatever communications you may need to be able to communicate out the plan to your end users. Just there with them every step of the way to try to take some of that heavy lift off of the DAFA. So. Anything else on that, gentlemen?
I'll just add that a lot of the capabilities that we're talking about usually are informed by the customer's requirements, right? Whether it's their use cases and the discovery and that process, we want to make sure they're partners as we build out what DoDNet looks like in the future, right? So their requirements, their requests, their use cases, their mission activities, those type of things go into the overall architecture, the design, how we can meet those requirements as DoDNet grows. So we want to make sure they're part of the entire process, not just, hey, migration's over, operations sustainment has kicked in, and things kind of end. It's going to be a continuous process that we want to make sure we work and partner with the DAFA on, or any of the agencies that consume the service.
And every DAFA is unique, right? So they're all going to require, it's not a one-size-fits-all migration. And so making sure we have that transparency and build that plan together just helps streamline this already extremely complex effort as well. Okay, let's see, Chad, what are the benefits the migrated users can expect?
Sure. So as we think about migrating the users over to DoDNet, there's a number of benefits that come with that. So we think about what we're doing and taking over those services for the DAFAs. It's about lowering their overall maintenance, the responsibilities they have from a maintenance standpoint, but also reducing cost. So that's really one of our focus areas, is how do we take that burden off of the DAFAs and mission partners as we bring them over and let them focus more on their mission IT aspect. As we think about the overall DoDNet offering, a lot of it is about, and you'll see here as we think about Gen 2 R1, it's about scalability. So adding scalability as we bring on more and more users, how do we ensure that user experience is continuing to scale with the network and the environment we have? We're thinking about redundancy. How do we ensure that we have redundancy and resiliency within the network and architecture, but also strengthening the cybersecurity posture as well, making sure that as we think about the threats that we're going to face both now and in the future, that we're strengthening that cyber posture, we're taking control of that, and really focused on that. So those are some of the technical benefits that we're looking at. We talked about reducing the overall cost for those DAFAs, but also just making sure that we also focus on customer experience. So it's often looked at as a byproduct of the work we're doing, but one of the big focus areas we have is a real focus on the mission and the customers and the end users as we think about DoDNet and how we're supporting them from a day-to-day basis.
And just to add there, right, we talked about the journey from a migration perspective or a DAFA, but we also understand that the journey for an end user is different as well, right? And there's unique challenges there, as well as unique communication requirements, unique support requirements, not just individual DAFAs, but the individual user groups themselves as well. And that's a key focus area for us that Chad mentioned, is that user experience and making sure that they know what to expect and that they can support their mission from a day-to-day perspective.
So just a couple things to piggyback off there. In some situations, we have DAFAs that come to us and say, hey, we'd also like the conference rooms taken care of, or we may need wireless support. Do you want to touch on that a little bit, and how, there's almost like a catalog of services and they can choose from?
Yeah, and I think that's really important, right? We talk about, like, from a network or an end user endpoint perspective, that each DAF is different. We also have, service offerings that are pretty broad that allow for the modernization of different aspects of the network or of the services. So conference rooms are a key area, particularly, Teams integration and cameras that work and things like that, where a lot of times modernization hasn't happened, right? And so that's definitely an area that we're looking at, a part of our discovery efforts as well, that DAFAs can choose to do. You also have wireless is a key area for a lot of agencies that don't have that. So a focus there on both providing a universal solution, but also particular solutions for the physical sites that are there.
Yeah, and just to add to that as well, standardizing, right? So getting to a place where we can go ahead and standardize key areas across our architecture and our infrastructure is important, right? To help, one, to Chad's point, kind of lower costs where we see it, and also gain efficiencies, right, from an operational perspective. So lowering costs, hey, by being able to standardize on particular tool sets or processes is important, but where we can go ahead and have those efficiencies, because a lot of the technologies, whether they're across a NIPR or CIPR enclave, are very similar, right? So we want to be able to drive those efficiencies into the architecture by using standard practices, common tool sets. Those things are very important for the overall kind of scalability of the service and how we expand it to the other DAFAs.
Yeah, and just to add to that as well, if you haven't gotten a book, there's a booklet on the table. There's a QR code on the back. You can see more about the services and the service offerings there as well.
Hey, Larry, could you go to the next chart for me, sir? And just this is the QR code. See what I did there? But also, please come and take a booklet. To add to what you were saying, Mike, about the standardization, one of the things we have, because we also understand, it's going to take some time to be able to migrate a user. But let's say that organization would like to start the process a little bit earlier with the adoption of some of the software products. Can you talk to a little bit about what we have available?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a DoDNet catalog. It is a catalog of applications, infrastructure tools, hardware, endpoint devices. Those things are standardized on our catalog to provide not only a place for the customers to go and look who are interested in our services to see what they can take advantage of, right? They can order off the catalog, they can get specifications off the catalog, technical requirements. We encourage the use of that if you're going to adopt DoDNet because it is already approved software, it's already approved hardware that can be integrated into a DoDNet infrastructure seamlessly, right? So that's the kind of importance of that catalog, and it allows us to drive that standardization. If there's a common use case across the DAFAs or across all of our customers, we want to make sure it's included into that catalog as much as possible to drive that standardization and allow us to go ahead and scale from there as well, right? We also want to be able to see where the use cases can be for additional tool sets that need to go on that catalog. So we don't want it to be stagnant either, right? We want that catalog to be able to be evolve into new use cases, new scenarios, new technology offerings that'll be a part of that catalog as well.
If I could add to that, so I think what Mike talked about is really important because as we think about the journeys, it's not an overnight migration for DAFA. There's a process we're working through and really trying to drive that forward. So as organizations are thinking about where they are with end-of-life equipment, where they are with technology, we really encourage those orgs to take a look at that catalog. And as you're thinking about tech refresh and other things, if they're looking at the catalog, buying off the standard for DoDNet, it only helps with the eventual migration for those DAFAs because they're already starting to work through that in advance of the migrations, getting the equipment that's part of the standard catalog already that really aids in that overall adoption as we start doing the planning and design work for the DAFAs.
Absolutely. And I think it goes back to, so just to hit on a couple things, we've got the approved product list, the approved software list, so if folks want to be thinking ahead, right, and starting to adopt some of those things and prep for their migration. But also we know that the DAFAs like DMA, like you mentioned, have these operation and maintenance contracts that are coming time for renewal, and eventually they're going to be moving into DoDNet. So you can use our DES vehicle, our Defense Enclave Services contract, to get in front of that now and start the adoption of some of the operation maintenance and have our team go ahead and take care of that for you so that you're not stuck in this weird limbo phase where you've got an existing contract and then also trying to transition. So 3 options there for you as you start to think about your future migration. Thank you, guys. All right, so moving on to our next question. I think we touched on, JB, some of the most recent milestones. Did we touch on that? Did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so we'll add a little bit there. So what we're talking about here, as Mike mentioned in the beginning, in terms of our next generation capability, the few areas of focus is mainly around endpoint management, as well as network operations. And so one of the critical components or capabilities that we added was our virtual desktop as a service. And this is really going to be powerful not only at DISA, which is our focus right now, but as we roll this out in the end of May, as well for the DAFAs. And there are a number of agencies already that use virtual desktop infrastructure as a key component of their end user services. This capability is going to be scalable, rapidly scalable, very resilient, redundant, as well as interoperable. So you can use it on any device, anywhere in the world. And that's what's really critical for a lot of our DAFAs is that they have that flexibility in terms of how they access our services and how the end user and the mission is supported.
Yeah, just to add on that, one of our taglines we've had in a booklet here: any device, anywhere, at any time, right? So just having that availability of being able to produce a desktop, collaborate, work with your mission partners, work with your teams internally. Those things are very key in order to go ahead and drive the mission success. So we want to make sure that we're being flexible with our services, having offerings that, especially at our NIPR and SIPR enclaves, that are accessible at, with different devices, right? We want to have that interoperability as well. We want to be able to go ahead and say, if you're using an iPad over here, or if you're using, a laptop or a Windows device, whatever it may be, right? You have the option to obtain those services in a desktop to be able to meet your needs. So those are the things that we're kind of keen on that virtual desktop as a service.
Yeah.
And all you need is a CAC reader, right?
Yeah, all you need is a CAC reader,
Yeah.
so or a YubiKey. But another area of focus, as I said, right, was our network operations, and this is really focusing on automation, right? As we scale and grow across the DAFAs, the clip of change on the network is going to grow as well, and so what we need to make sure that we can do is that we can manage that as well as scale effectively, right? We know that missions are very different, but also missions rapidly change, and that means the network needs to scale, needs to grow, and also needs to change. And so a key area of focus for us has been on building out automations that can remain or keep the network secure, have the appropriate approvals, but nonetheless can kind of end-to-end automate that change, make those updates, keep our cyber posture strong, and so that's really another area that we focused on in Gen 1.
Yeah, as well as reducing those kind of operational impacts, right, from whether you have rogue changes happening on the network, whether you have maybe things that are unplanned, you have maintenance activities, any given point, right, something that's an unscheduled change or maybe an unapproved change or even something that is planned can go wrong, right? So we want to be able to make sure as we're automating those steps, right, there's validations that are in place, there's ability to roll back to a known good state as much as possible, as well as just kind of making sure that the right teams are notified as well, right? So, there's being informed across the organization from an operations perspective, as well as, senior leaders and things like that are necessary to run kind of smooth operations, avoid the blue on blues that happen, that we all track from a monitoring or operations center. Those type of things we're trying to build into our capabilities to make sure that we have an effective service that can scale without impacting mission, right, and causing outages and things that lead to long downtimes. Those are the type of the automation capabilities that we want to build into our services on a regular basis.
And those dashboards, right?
Dashboards as well, right?
Yeah, so I'm really excited about this one because I think it's going to be great to be able to have these operational dashboards, leveraging Power BI potentially, where even our mission partners will have access and they can go and see how things are performing. How are we looking, right? Are we green across the board? Are there some areas that we need to be focused on? So we're one step ahead of it, rather than waiting for someone to notify us of a ticket or an outage or an issue. We have things there today, but this is just bringing more automation and providing that forward-facing view for the customers and for us to be able to see what's going on behind the scenes there. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's really important, right? Chad spoke about earlier that transparency, and I think that's what's really critical is that, we're transparent with the DAFA, but as well, many of the DAFAs are not used to having that shared responsibility model where maybe mission apps may be deployed on their infrastructure, but the way the users access them are through DoDNet. And so that kind of single pane of glass, that dashboarding capability is really critical to make sure that, they still have an end-to-end operational view and that they can understand what's happening, and if there are impacts, be able to get the right people in the room to resolve those.
Yeah, and Jonathan, you mentioned two phases, right? We've got our endpoint management, and we've also got our network management. One of the things, and I wanted to hit on this, was our DISA leadership is always pushing us, how can we posture ourselves, right? And we talk about that here today with the tools and capabilities we're going to be rolling out. But also, is there a way maybe we could take a multi-phased approach to migrations? So Mike, do you want to touch on a little bit our thoughts there on how we could do that?
Yeah, so by looking at kind of multi-phase, where we're talking about breaking out how the migrations flow, with a focus on potential endpoint migrations versus the network migrations. We want to be able to focus on and give a lot of planning to the endpoint and the user experience itself, leveraging the capabilities we're talking about in Gen 2 R1, cloud-focused, using hybrid technologies, but being able to move that user over and manage their device specifically as a part of their phase one, bring them onto a centralized management plane where they can take advantage of the cloud technologies, the centralized dashboarding, the user experience monitoring, those type of capabilities, and then breaking that out from their network services migration, which may happen at a later phase. So we're looking at these two options where the user experience can be managed centrally by the DoDNet services, and then a phase two of migrating the network services, the LAN management, as a separate phase of the overall migration. That LAN management can enable automation, the management capabilities from a dashboarding view as well for the network operations, as well as the integrations with, say, their switch management, their firewall management, talking about what the roadmap would be for maybe zero trust and some other capabilities there. All those things are a part of those two phases where we're talking about how we manage the user experience as well as the network access management. Those two type of capabilities as well as circuits as well, right? So one of the big things is the WAN management as well. That's a part of that network access. Those type of things are important as we talk about the two different areas of the migration.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, I think that the multi-phased approach really speaks volume to where the program is headed from an overall sort of transformational and innovation perspective. So one of the big things is continuing to challenge the status quo of what we're doing, how we've done things, and making sure that we evolve over time. As Mike said, traditionally it was sort of an end-to-end, large-scale migration. We're looking at the multi-phased approach now of how do we think about things differently? How do we ensure that we're able to offer services that are available now to the DAFs in a different way, and just continuing to evolve the way we're thinking about it. And it ties into one of the big themes that we have across the program is really that continuous innovation, continuous improvement, and really rethinking things. So from a migration standpoint, thinking about the multi-phased approach, from an innovation standpoint, how do we continue to evolve and stay ahead of and abreast of the latest technologies and capabilities as we think about that DoDNet offering? So really kind of thinking through that, from a planning and migration standpoint, an innovation standpoint, transformation standpoint, it's really important to make sure that we're staying ahead of that and really touching on that user experience from an end user perspective.
And you guys touched on it a little bit as well, right? Every DAFA, every mission partner has unique challenges. So where there's a challenge maybe on the network side of things, that's where we ramp up and make sure we're tackling the network migration first, right? Just out of need for that particular agency. Mm-hmm. Same thing, vice versa. On the user side, their user management may be a little more challenging, so we want to tackle that as a part of their migration first. So it gives us the flexibility to address based on the discovery and that collaboration we were talking about earlier, to kind of make sure that we are able to take care of their needs that they have immediately, as opposed to, like you said, a very longer phase migration that would have to cover the end-to-end and maybe make it more complicated or make their migration a little bit more drawn out.
All right, so I think we hit on the next question, Mike, but I'm going to ask it. So if there's anything else you want to add to it. We talked about some of the initiatives we're rolling out to bring on our mission partners faster. We talked about automation, our virtual desktop as a service deployment that we've got on the roadmap. Any other initiatives or anything else you all can think of you want to hit on?
I'll just say that we're trying to make sure we're using more agile framework as a part of this overall effort. So, a little bit more monolithic kind of project management is what we used in the past. It's part of our Gen 1, where it's, very waterfall approach. Hey, we have one task, we move on to the next. We want to be able to go ahead and look at our agile methodology and see how we can go ahead and do sprints, move things a little more quickly. The Leidos team has been great in trying to implement that for us. It's a culture change, it's a mindset change that needs to happen inside our organization as a whole. It's not going to be a quick change, if you will, but we're going to try to implement the right processes to adopt it for not only what we're doing for DoDNet, but how can we bake it into a lot of the other processes that run our organization and govern our organization as a whole, right, within the program, as well as kind of down to the technical SMEs, right? All of them play a part in this overall agile methodology.
All right, JB, what steps have we taken to build in resiliency, redundancy, scalability to DoDNet?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we're thinking about the services that we're building out on Gen 2 R1, we're thinking about the mission partners' needs and making sure that that service is both scalable but also resilient. And what's critical is that we're thinking about it not just regionally, right, and looking at services of how we build them out for specific regions, but also understanding that we need flexibility. And so when we're doing our resiliency testing, when we're doing our failover testing, what we're looking at is trying to see where can we improve, where can we build those out, as well as in the future, how can we add to that resiliency, right? And that's what's really key. Sometimes, the initial requirement may not be as robust or as require that level of resiliency, but we know some mission partners in particular have a zero downtime, zero amount of the time, right? So never down, right? 24/7 support, and each of our services are going to be able to offer that level of service that DAFA has come to expect and their mission requires. But that's a roadmap, right? There is a journey to that as well, and so. A number of the services we're focusing on in Gen 2 are natively resilient, right, or globally redundant. But even so, we also want to be able to make sure that we have that kind of offline mode or ability to do a forward deployment or other types of deployment models as well. And so we're really keeping that in mind in terms of our overarching architecture is kind of what's available today and what are we building out in the future.
All right, Chad, next question's for you. What can we expect in the future? So we're talking about a lot about Gen 2 R1. Where do we see ourselves going past that?
Sure. So as we think about the future, as Carissa mentioned, so we're talking a lot about Gen 2 R1. We're going to roll out a series of capabilities and offerings at the end of May. But really from an overall perspective, we're thinking beyond that. We have built out a strategic roadmap of where we want to go overall and really thinking about what are the capabilities, what are the offering, what are the processes that we need to be thinking about as we continue to scale DoDNet and moving on from that standpoint. So as we think about the future, it's really based on looking at our processes, procedures, tools, and the innovation and making sure that the decisions we make and where we're headed from an overall perspective is in line with thinking ahead of where the DAFAs are and where those organizations are that are coming in there, really to start driving some of that and making sure that we're setting ourselves up to scale both from a process standpoint but also from a tooling standpoint. And I think the other thing that I would add there is really thinking about, as Mike talked about, sort of that agile methodology and thinking about I think shorter deployment of different capabilities and processes, thinking more, how do we start to get incremental opportunities to roll out capabilities as they become available so the DAFAs can take advantage of it in a shorter time frame from what we're offering there. And I think that's going to be one of the areas to success as we think about the long-term roadmap of how do we start to get those incremental changes, incremental capability offerings where we're continuing to get sort of that continual process improvement, use that agile methodology.
Yeah, I'll just add, Chad's absolutely correct. And one of the main things that we want to look at when we are doing these sprints and these service offerings, there's no silver bullet, right, that's going to fix everything for everyone, right, as they roll onto our services. We can't be everything to everyone. We can't fix all the problems that are there. But we want to make sure we go on that journey of how can we improve our services, right? It'll be a joint effort to make sure that we are looking at how we scale the solutions, whether they're unclassed, whether they're classified, whatever it may be. And the mission sets are different, right? There are requirements on both classifications and multiple higher classifications as we look at those that are going to be different. But it's not a one-size-fits-all, like Carissa mentioned earlier. We really need to make sure that we are looking specifically at solution sets that are going to help enable the mission and make sure that we're not making the wrong investments, but we want to partner with where the investments need to be, have the greatest impact is what we really want to get after from when we talk about the technology or the roadmap and have those discussions.
And if I could just add one more thing, Carissa. So Mike talked about it, right? It's partnership. We talked about it as a theme in the beginning. We've talked about it throughout. One of the things as we think about that long-term roadmap, we want to hear from the partners, the mission partners. We want to hear from industry as well. We want to know what do we need to be out there to make sure that the capabilities we're offering are in line with what our customers and end users want. So a big piece of that roadmap is that really that partnership and making sure that we're listening and we're taking the time to get that feedback from the mission partners in terms of ensuring that the capabilities we offer are meeting the needs of those users. And one of the things that we have there on the QR code, I'll chime in on your QR code again, is we're thinking about that as sort of that front door, that entry into it, right? So it's not just the service catalog, the different offerings we have, but also, I think long-term the plan would be let's get feedback in there, right? Whether it's an Ask DoDNet button or mailbox or something like that, making sure that that's an opportunity to provide that feedback as well.
Absolutely. No, I think that's all a really good point. And JB, I want to ask you, how have you seen the industry partners helping us with our current Gen 2 R1 effort, but also where could we use their help in the future?
Yeah, and I think that's really key. As Chad mentioned, this is a partnership not only with the DAFAs but also with industry, and I think it's really critical is that as we look to deploy capabilities, right, we're not looking to have that silver button like Mike was saying, right? It's a partnership and a stack that is going to be interoperable, right? And we understand that different mission partners have already bought into certain vendors, whether that be hardware or software. Where it makes sense, we're going to look to adopt that and bring that into the standard, or look to lifecycle that in time, right? We're not going to try to, universally deploy a single capability on a single software stack or hardware stack, but really look and see what makes sense. And from a technical perspective, an operational perspective, a cost perspective, look where we can make those partners, where we can develop standardization as well as optimized operations to achieve that cost efficiency that we're talking about. It's really important that we all walk this journey together, right? And we all think about the hard problems of how do we consolidate this network, how do we do that successfully, and how do we ultimately support those end users and fulfilling their agency's missions.
Thank you, guys. One last thing I wanted to bring up is, and I'm sure folks always, we always get this question, how much does this cost? So one of the things we're looking at with Gen 2 R1 in particular is we're working with our DISA cost estimator team to come up with our rates for Gen 2 R1. Again, we talked about that multi-phased approach and really what we're trying to do, and I'm arming the team to try to help us figure out here in the very near future is coming up with a tiered rate structure. So if an organization is interested in taking that multi-phased migration approach where you have your endpoints go first, you have a rate for that. And then when your network is ready to be migrated, we can take you to the next tier and build in that network piece. So while we don't have the cost defined quite yet, we are getting very, very close to being able to offer that, and it will be made available in the very near future on our SharePoint page, which you can find via the QR code. So we are working on that and hope to have that information very soon. Okay, that's all the questions I have, gentlemen. Anything you want to add before we turn it over to Q&A? Okay. All right, so we will go ahead and open it up if anybody has any questions. Okay.
Question for Mr. Nebraska.
Yeah.
So I think in terms of endpoint management, I believe you defined that from the DoDNet perspective as desktop as a service capability. Is there more to that definition, or is it just virtualization?
So desktop as a service is our broad category. It also includes our virtual desktop as a service that we offer as well. So in terms of the capabilities, it's broadly defined really within two frameworks. One is unified endpoint management, which is mainly focused on physical devices, right, and managing those laptops, desktops, et cetera. And our partners in DISA on the DO side manage the O365 policies, as well as on the SD side manage the mobile phones and tablets. So really DISA as a whole, as an agency, has a full unified endpoint management offering across multiple programs. What's important for DoDNet specifically is that we're really looking at the capability in two lights, right? That virtual capability, any device, any location, anywhere. And then you have the physical, government-furnished device, that traditional access method as well. And DoDNet manages both, as well as moving to a cloud-first approach in terms of how we manage that from a tool set perspective.
Does that help, sir? Okay. Any other questions from the audience? Yes, ma'am. We have a mic back there, but this is so much easier.
I was just curious, what are one or two challenges that you're seeing with all this? I'm sure, are the DAFAs cooperating? Are they looking forward to coming into the DoDNet? Or do you have some challenges?
How much time do we have? Yeah, this isn't easy.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Chris.
No, I was literally going to say that same thing.
Yeah, no, this isn't easy, right? If it's been done, right? There's been, collaborations, there's been consolidation networks that have happened before, but focusing on the endpoint, I'm not really sure that there's been a large effort on that. So there are challenges from whether it's a budgeting aspect for some DAFAs, whether it's a technology aspect, whether it's tech debt, right? We're managing up from wireless down to the faceplate and everything that goes in between and all the connectivity there. So there's lifecycle replacement like we touched on. There is technical debt from a cabling perspective. There's power issues, facility issues. All those type of things kind of impose challenges on trying to move forward as we go ahead and get to a standardized architecture, standardized framework. But it's not without the partnership that we are able to move forward, right? So it's not without interfacing with the program office, interfacing with our customer engagement, interfacing with the program managers, interfacing with the senior leadership across the board that we wouldn't be able to go ahead and do this. So the challenges are great, but just being able to work across multiple teams is going to help us get there, honestly.
And to answer the second part of that question, I mean, Mike's right. Challenges, but those are also opportunities, right, for us to continue to move forward. And to answer the second part of your question is, the DAFAs have been great, I think, that we've worked with. They're very responsive. We're working through it. But as Mike said, it's hard, right? What we're trying to do is it's different, it's hard, it's organizational change management, and it's really having those dialogues. That customer engagement team that Mike talked about has been really important for having those regular, transparent conversations with the DAFAs. I really think that's going to be how we start to how we continue to evolve and move that forward as we work and partner with the DAFAs.
Yeah, and to add to that in terms of the challenges, right? I'd say the challenges have really been kind of in two categories. One is that this whole idea of common IT and mission IT is new. These have always lived together forever since the agency started, right? And so understanding how we go about separating those and how the DAFA can focus on their mission applications, et cetera, and we can build this common IT set that ultimately brings efficiency, scalability that the agency is looking for. And so that really, I think, is one of the main challenges, is how do we get after that. The second piece of that is really how do we inform our roadmap, understanding all of the mission capabilities required for the DAFAs, and really making sure that we can support those in time, right? So there's migration planning, and we have to make sure that the capabilities that the DAFAs need are there when the DAFA needs to migrate, right? And so I think that planning has really been a challenge, because there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of agencies involved.
Yeah, and I would just offer too, it's probably a fair statement that a lot of what got us to coming up with our Gen 2 R1 strategy was getting that feedback from the DAFAs and hearing their challenges, what's not working, where can we make some improvements to make sure we're delivering capabilities that meet their needs and close some of those gaps that they have today with their legacy infrastructure.
And that's a great point, Krista, because it's really important that all of these capabilities that we're delivering in Gen 2 are all capabilities that were on our partners' roadmaps, right? All of the DAFAs had many of these technologies, many of these tool sets already chosen. They were on their roadmap, and we saw and we knew that DoDNet needed to go there to be able to support them, as well as make sure that when they migrate, we're improving their capabilities, we're improving their stance, right? And so we took it on ourselves to adopt that first and to make sure that the agencies that we're migrating in the near term, we're improving their operational capabilities.
Absolutely. Yes. Does that help me?
So the dialogue that you're going down, DoDNet is going to be as big as Navy's enterprise network. So they went through a 25-year journey that was full of lots of landmines and a lot of lessons learned. DoDNet now has the advantage of gaining lessons learned from that, plus cloud technology and where DISA is taking the cloud in the future to connect the warfighter, connect missions. Can you talk a little bit about how you might be thinking about taking advantage and learning lessons learned from others so that DoDNet can take advantage of that?
Yeah, I'm really happy. I appreciate that question. So the DoD CIO's office, we partner with them a lot as well with strategic planning, and that was something just recently I was talking to their leadership about, going out and hearing from the services who have been through this already. The Navy is a perfect example, capturing those lessons learned. Virtual Desktop as a service was something we were just talking about this morning. They've rolled that out already. The capability is Azure Virtual Desktop, which all of us are using in our 365 environment, or not all of us are using, but have the ability to adopt. So don't want to reinvent the wheel. Want to hear from them what worked, what didn't work, what policies do we need to be thinking about, all those different things. So capturing those lessons learned. So that is something we're looking at, reaching out to them and seeing where we can capture some of that and apply it, so that we can be efficient about this, right? And try to be timely about this as well. Does that help? Anybody want to add anything?
I'm just going to say that I think DISA is uniquely positioned as they provide services to a lot of those different services across the board to get that feedback through multiple channels, right? So whether it's the leadership, whether it's just integrating because we already provide some capability to those the services, whether it's Army, Navy, Air Force, whoever, we have that kind of posture already to go ahead and say, hey, we have the right POC to talk to about those capabilities. We are already talking to them about future architecture. We're already talking to them about how we can improve some other service that they may be consuming. This is just an add-on to that we can go ahead and say, hey, not only are you providing, some type of maybe cyber capability or maybe a long-haul transport, now you have DoDNet and that common IT network as a part of the kind of fleet of portfolio services that are out there for the agency that we're going to be a part of the conversation now. So I think because we are talking, across the board to a lot of different groups in DoD, this as an IT service provider to the whole entire department has a good, posture to go ahead and say, hey, we're going to include DoDNet in all those conversations, right, going forward.
Yeah, just to add to that, to answer your question, speed and agility is a theme for DoDNet. You don't get speed and agility by reinventing the wheel, relearning the same lessons that others have learned. And there's a reason we're at this conference today, right? It's to have those dialogues, continue that listening from others. It is certainly not a not invented here mentality in DoDNet. We want to leverage what's been done. That's how we're going to get speed and agility as we think about long term where we want to go.
Thank you. Appreciate the question. Any other questions? Are we good on time? Yeah? Okay. We have time if anyone else has any other questions. Okay. So we will be right after this, just on the other side of this wall here. So if anybody would like to come visit us, we'll be hanging out over there to answer any other questions that folks may have. Please don't hesitate to stop by. If you have ideas or thoughts or recommendations for us, things that we should be thinking about, we welcome that as well. I think partnership is absolutely a theme here today. So please feel free to come and see us after this. With that, gentlemen, I'll turn it over to you first for closing remarks.
Sure. Thank you, Carissa. I think as we look forward, we really do look from hearing from each of you, from the partners, from the vendors, to really inform that roadmap and to move out and help support the migration and the optimization of the DoD's network.
Yeah, I mean, we really appreciate the opportunity to come out here to talk at the conference today, talk to you about what we're doing from a DoDNet perspective. I think it's really exciting stuff of where we're headed over the next couple months, but long-term what we're doing. So please don't be shy with questions. If you want to talk to us after or things come up later on, really want to have those dialogues. You know, we recognize that at least the four of us, right, we're not going to solve all these things ourselves, and we want to hear from you, right? We want to hear what makes sense, what did you see that you like, what maybe things we need to think about. So really encourage that feedback. But thank you for your time.
Same thing. Thank you. Thank you to my colleagues and panelists here and Carissa. Really enjoyed being out here with you all. Looking forward to talking to you more. So appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. And I just want to say partnership right here with our partners at Leidos and DISA, working to break down those barriers and make sure that we're thinking through all of these things together. I think that is just history in the making, and working together as a team to be able to solve a lot of these problems. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for being on the panel with me today, and to all of you, thank you so much for coming out and listening where we're going and how we're doing. And we'll be around after this. So, with that, we'll conclude. Have a great afternoon.